here at 2 a.m. in the morning and no one would look.
Yeah.
Better,
That's
you
much
think?
better.
Better?
Yeah.
Much better.
Yeah, it's better.
Okay, good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, super. Yeah. All right. So is the line the director who yells faster and faster in Lorne and Rose, is that a reference to George Cukor on the set of the film Rich and Famous? Is it autobiographical or?
Nothing to do with me. No, no. But that
Okay.
was certainly something he did, yes.
It's interesting because his name means sugar. So I mean the fact that he would yell, yeah, it does.
Really?
Cukor in Hungarian means sugar. So the fact that he would yell faster, faster and make people nervous doesn't quite tie in with the name, but well, it is what it is. Right. Why is Bhutan, the happiest country on earth, the destination chosen for Rose to share with Lauren in the opening scene?
Well, just talking about the faster thing for a second, like if we're sort of talking about like communicating with, if the sort of theme of the conversation has to do with communication, this is always one of the things they teach you in directing school, like telling actors to like, you know, be faster or be slower, or there's certain things that are just like not that helpful. And I think
Right.
I think faster is one of those things that's really just like not really that helpful. Um, Jacqueline and Kelly could probably talk more about sort of like bad bad directing notes. But Bhutan, it wasn't really that intentional why she went to Bhutan. It was more just sort of like I've been to Bhutan and I went to the Queen's Temple, and there wasn't cherry incense or diamond shaped drums, but I sort of, when I was writing that monologue, it obviously sort of came out, the sort of description of what I imagined it to
Oh,
be.
that's interesting. I didn't know that.
I mean, Bhutan,
No,
again, it
it
goes
wasn't.
back.
It wasn't really like that.
No, it goes back to the Hilton novel. It goes back to Lost Horizon, 37 film, Shangri-La, all of that. I mean, Bhutan is one of those countries that would be described as a type of Shangri-La. And for me, the theme, especially in the opening sequence and then in the closing sequence, it seems to come full circle for me in terms of locations, feel, and that sense of a type of place that has a peacefulness, a utopia type of experience. That's what came back. It started that way and it came back to me. And I was wondering if you had visited. So then you did visit Bhutan and you did. So you had a kind of feeling for the place and
Sure. I
that.
mean, that's all they talk about when you go there is like living a life of happiness. Like the entire society, or at least is the way
Right.
I experienced it, was sort of focused on how do we be happy?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Have either of you been there? Miss Bissett, have you ever been there?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I have not
Kelly?
either. No, sadly, no.
Yeah. Sounds like a lovely place to visit,
Oh,
actually.
yes, I hear it is wonderful. I know people who went there in the 60s, which was very unusual. They were
Ah,
enthralled completely, riding on
oh,
horseback everywhere. And
oh,
it's,
that's lovely.
yeah.
Nice. Okay. Now, after viewing Harold and Lillian, A Hollywood Love Story, its content leads me to ask what research went into the writing of Lauren and Rose. And this would be on the part of you, Russ, and then if research on the part of the actors.
I'm sort of embarrassed to say like I don't really I don't think I researched very much. Like
No, I mean,
I just used my imagination. I mean, all of it comes out of my imagination. I guess I sort of like would research certain facts, like to make sure that, if Rose or Lauren is referencing something, I'd make sure that I
mhm.
like, spelled it right or got the names, but I didn't really like, I didn't really research it. I just sort of like wrote it.
So then when you write, it comes directly from your imagination or from something you've experienced? I mean, could you talk a little bit about how you write?
Well, I think imagination and experience are so kind of linked together. Like your imagination kind of jump frogs off something that you've experienced, and they kind of inform each other. So I don't think it's
Right.
really one or the other. I think it's them kind of together.
Uh-huh. Interesting. Interesting. I'm not sure about that. When I was very young, I imagined places I hadn't experienced. I wanted to experience them, and I imagined them because I wanted to experience them. I had some experience. I mean, Brooklyn of my youth was Europe. In There were many different nationalities, so we all used to play together. Greeks, Norwegians, French, Italian, Irish, Welsh, you name it. So I had that experience, and that made me imagine what it would be like to study in Europe, but I hadn't been there. I mean, my first experience of Europe happened when I was 16 years old, when I traveled to England with a high school class. Before that, it was just in my imagination, but it was very real to me. So, in a sense, I get what you're saying, that the two connect, but sometimes one precedes the other, and you have to go off of that because you have nothing concrete. You have no other context. It's just what you're dreaming or what you imagine something could be. So you're saying the two for you when you write are intimately connected. They're both present.
I guess so. I think so. I have to think about like specific moments in the movie. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
more.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. It's funny what you just said, because there's that line that Lauren says about the Paris that he imagines
Right.
in the film. Was
Right.
What is the exact line, Russell? But I think that touches on exactly what you were saying.
The France of my imagination is better to visit than the France of reality.
Yes,
Right, right.
I think that's very
Wow.
true for Lauren. Yeah, he probably has a very
Why? I'm curious. Why?
I think Lauren is a romantic in a lot of ways. You know, he has like he's very Lauren's very he's very informed by the past and sort of his dreams of the past and the way he imagines people from the past. And you know, that's the world that his mind lives in. You know, so I think that, and in a way, like Rose is almost like a weird figment of Lauren's imagination. You know, like he
Thank
kind
you
of
very much.
he sort of invented this Rose-like thing in his imagination. So it's very easy for me to think that like how Lauren dreams of France, you know, and he talks about, you know, impressionist paintings and Edith Piaf,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
he's
Mm-hmm.
created this whole thing in his mind about France that probably is very different than what is actually there.
But lots of people that would be all they would know of France. I mean, people don't know much about France.
Yeah.
They know that the Parisians are a bit annoying, and they know that Edith Piaf's song was great, and they know that some of one or two artists, but they don't know much about it. So I mean, it's really just a reduction of those basic ideas, that image. I see it as a major reduction of French culture,
Yeah.
all in one frame.
Okay.
Hmm?
Kelly, is that how you tried to play it?
Well, it's funny because I I imagined France that way, and then I went to France, and it was actually very close to that. So, at
Really?
least, yeah, absolutely. Surprisingly so. So, for me, it was very easy to tap into sort of a romantic imagination of what France could be like, because that was my experience. But I do think what Russell said, that Lauren is a romantic, and I think Russell very much is a romantic. I mean, he's constantly speaking from the imagination, just in everyday speech. So for me, it was just easy to sort of draw from the way Russell sees the world.
Okay. Cool. All right. That's neat.
Yeah.
That's neat. So then the storyboarding, that wouldn't apply either. Is there anything visual though that goes into, like, when you're writing a script? Do you ever draw out what it is you want a scene to be or to become, if you know what I'm saying?
I've never done that, but I mean, sounds fun. But that's not what I've never done it. But maybe I should.
Okay.
I don't know, Kelly. Have you done that when you've been writing scenes?
No, not really.
Miss Bissett, has it ever been that you've been on a film where it's been either all storyboarded or you've seen something visual?
I've tried to not know that information. If it is storyboarded, I don't want to know about it.
Okay.
I really do not want to know. I want to know that the director has a more malleable imagination than just bing, 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 bing. You know, I don't like the idea of storyboarding at all, though I know it's necessary sometimes, but I really close my eyes to it. I just want it all to be new.
So what you're saying is for you, storyboarding doesn't keep it fresh.
I don't know if it does for the director. Obviously, the director's got to be fresh, but as a character, I do not want to be held in by anything.
Okay.
I'd rather be an untidy actress than a very tidy one.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that, sorry,
Go
Rice,
ahead.
we will say that, Russell, you did have a very specific ideas about the visual language of the film, about how the camera, you know, how the camera wanted to move throughout. I mean, you were very specific about what you wanted to accomplish in terms of the reflections, you know, using the mirror, and there was a lot of specific things you did.
Yeah, there was I mean, it was definitely very intentional, like all of the shots and how we were, again, like how we were using the mirrors, how we were using color in the 3 different scenes and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think I did do a lot of storyboards for the auction scenes, and they weren't really storyboards. They were just sort of like more like me like doodling.
Why for those scenes, Russ? Why?
Because basically you're trying to tell this person's whole life story through like very specific kind of insert like shots, you know, and we were trying to give each of those insert like shots like a real personality. So, you know, like there were these sort of cuts of light on the books that Rose had, you know, kind of read about spirituality, and like, you know, they were all like very sort of extreme angles because we were trying to create this kind of like sort of almost like grotesque world of sort of celebrity carry on, you know, crawling over all the detritus of someone's life. So, you know, I did sort of storyboard all that stuff.
Okay, cool.
It was a lot of shots too. It was like,
what one shot I would love to bring up, Russell, to ask you, is the circular shot that went around Lauren as he was having that realization about Rose. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
yeah.
And that was a very specific thing that you wanted to accomplish. That I love that shot.
Well, that shot is actually in the script. I mean, in the script it says something like the camera moves around Rose and she captures the sun in her eyes, and like a great actress always knows exactly how to capture the right light in the right moment. It says that in the script, and then it says it's at this moment that Lauren realizes he has found the woman he wants to star in his film. Like it says, it's all sort of described in the script.
But this reference to light, I mean, it comes up again and again. I mean, Miss Bissett, you've talked about light numerous times in your interviews.
I have, yeah. It's for me, light is love. It's that simple.
Agreed. I think though that's not true for every actor or actress, though. I mean, an actor or an actress can look for light and not necessarily feel it or experience it as love.
Well, I'm only myself. I'm not able to speak for others. I just know that the presence of light can be an acceptance or a rejection.
So
and I feel it. I felt it very early on in my life because I worked with some great photographers. They were just taking pictures of me, but I noticed how it would correlate with the amount of affection and a sense of a generosity more than love, maybe. The desire to enhance the person you're filming in a way that is so they feel full and they can keep giving, rather than stopping the flow of that potential feeling when you're doing a photo session or when you're filming. One is, to me, it's very, very disturbing when the light is, when the generosity is not there.
So when Eva Serenity, when she photographed you, what was it that she was able to do? Because I have that book where it's the photograph. I do. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful book of photographs.
But
what was it that she could do?
Well, she used to, well, first I met her on Day for Night. She was, and she would insult me quite frequently and say, well, do something. I mean, do something, be sexy or something. Do something. And I was getting more absolutely paralyzed with fear of what does she mean? What is this context of what? What is this?
Right.
Who is this person
Mm-hmm.
having so much power on the set? And people sort of, and it had not a good effect on me. I got more and more tense actually, and we had to sort of find our way through that. And gradually, I got to know her, and I realized she was a very loving and warm person, and she photographed women well, and we started to laugh about it. But it was it wasn't always easy. I mean, being photographed isn't easy. Something has to go on between. Somebody doesn't get you, God, you can really be very, very uncomfortable, and you can start to hate the person who's taking the photograph.
Mm-hmm. When you're being filmed, so Russ, when you film, do you use a certain type of lens to get more or less light? And are actors more comfortable with certain lenses as opposed to other lenses that you might be using on a film?
Well, I mean, what lens you're using is always, like a super kind of specific choice. And,
Right.
I always have I guess I have my favorite, I always like the 85 millimeter lens, but there's something, just to talk about lens choice, there's something that we did in Lauren and Rose that's sort of unusual. Like in that whole third section of the movie, we're on a super long lens. I think it was like a 150. I mean, it was a really long lens. And
what does that mean? It means a wider shot, or
it means that it's the depth of focus is really shallow. Like you're basically within inches of going in and out of focus, because we wanted to give sort of Rose this sort of halo-y thing with the lights really, really soft in the background. And we're also shooting in the dark because it was supposed to be a night scene. So, when you don't have a lot of light and you have a really shallow depth of focus, it's a super challenging job for basically the guy who's keeping the actor in focus. And so we didn't want to tell Jacqueline, you can't move.
No, you never did. No, I didn't realize you were having such. That's really interesting.
So every time she would go forward, I would be next to the AC, and he would be like, "Whoa!"
I didn't know
keeping her in focus.
Thank you for not mentioning it, actually, because I
I
mean,
was going to say, because that would probably intimidate or stifle an actor. Kelly, you didn't know that either, or?
I didn't know that. I didn't know that either. But one thing I wanted to mention about the light, Jacqueline, is I never worked with an actor who was so aware of the light. It wasn't as if she was looking at the monitors to say, "Show me what the image is," but you were feeling the light on you, and you could tell when it wasn't feeling right. And I thought that was so specific, and I had never experienced that before. And you knew, like, the light is not loving me right now, and you would say that and adjust it, but you weren't looking at the monitor. So I thought that was interesting.
I feel it very, very much, and I feel it. I often feel that actors don't feel anything. They don't know what you're talking about. And this, I mean, I think of the films of the Swedish director Bergman. I think.
Bergman, yeah.
Bergman's films, when he would use the woman's face, he filmed women's faces like nobody else. I can't think of anybody. Those wonderful actresses. The skin was so present. Texture of the skin, you could almost, you could touch it. I mean, it wasn't about beauty, it was about essence, it was about content. It was just an absolutely extraordinary. And Sven Nykvist did that, and he used a long lens. He told me, I think he used a 135 when he was doing, because I said, when I finally met Sven Nykvist, I wasn't working with him, I asked him about it, and we talked about that. We talked about that. And one person with whom I felt that they got it was Gabriel Figueroa when I did Under the Volcano. He also
that's extraordinary. There's some shots of you, stills of you from that film that are absolutely, I mean, they're.
Well, I don't think he had anything to do with the stills, but his sense of, is one of the very few directors who put my soul on the screen. In the first sequence when I come into the restaurant with Albert Finney, when I saw it, I could feel it. I couldn't imagine that he'd done it, because nobody had done it. Basically, nobody ever got that from me. I just always used to think, God, I'm so disappointed. They don't see what I'm doing. There'd be too much light, too little light, filters, blocking, lack of real you know. And I saw my soul in that first sequence, and I started to cry. I just couldn't believe it that he was that sensitive.
Does that have something to do with the aura that either comes from an actor, or is it making what's inside come out? I guess that's a poor way of saying it. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to ask you.
It's seeing. It's seeing. It's a kind of listening. It's a kind of listening to the light, to the being aware. As you look at somebody's face, I mean, you get it's something. It's very delicate. It's amazing when it comes.
So it's a form of communication of a kind.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it's very, very full thing, and it's a very generous thing. I use the word generosity again.
Mm-hmm. Kelly, are there times when you feel that when you're being filmed?
I do, and I wanted to ask you, Jacqueline, do you feel like if the filmmaker or the photographer sees you, who you are generally just in life, in conversation, and how they listen, that they're able to translate that onto the screen? And I feel like in my experience, I think that it does translate, you know, and I think with Russell, I think this was a very personal film for me as well. And I feel like Russell and I became very close beforehand. And I feel like I was also seen in this film. I mean, a lot of this film is just images of Jacqueline and I speaking and listening, and you know, you're exposed the entire time. And I again feel very, very moved the way Russell captured that, because I feel like he did see us and does see us.
Yes. Well, I think when you start with a cinematographer and he has an attitude, which can happen because they feel that they know everything, it's very, very bad, and there's nothing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
It can be an extremely aggressive kind of power thing, and I've had it happen on several films, and sometimes that particular cinematographer had been a protege of somebody else who was very famous, and there's a kind of arrogance that can come, and you can, I mean, you know that it's going to be limited. It's never going to go beyond that point. It's never going to rise. It's going to be stuck in mediocrity because that person's attitude won't let them loose. It's kind of arrogance, and yet their masters were very good.
But the director chooses the cinematographer, correct? Or no?
Yes, generally.
Okay. So there's some leeway there. Can you speak to a director if a cinematographer is not quite capturing what it is that you want in terms of the?
Yeah, well, you can try.
Mm.
But the point that the film has started, they're bonded together, and even if the director's not particularly thrilled, often
Right.
directors don't have a big imagination. They don't necessarily see beyond just the lines of the script. They're busy directing traffic because they have
Right.
too many jobs to do on the film. They can't concentrate on the essence.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in the essence of what's going on. I mean, that's why I want to be an actor. And the listening thing is, you know, that's it. That's the beginning and end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Listening,
Mm-hmm.
your body and your face and your muscles, they all react very realistically.
So then, Russell, on this film, for you, the listening was a type of natural, is it fair to say, a natural extension of what you imagined the film to be?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the you know the reason Lauren and Rose talk the way they talk to each other is because the other person is really listening to them and interested in them and curious and hearing them. So, you know, one of the sort of essential casting, you know, questions was, you know, and this really had a lot to do with casting Kelly, was like, is this actor, when you look at them listening, do you really feel them like taking the other person in, you know? And that was like one thing that just Kelly was just great at doing. Yes. And just you just believe that Rose would feel free to talk to him and would be vulnerable with him and tell him everything, because he just looks at her with such curiosity and interest and real
Right.
he's there, you know.
Right. He's present. Yeah, absolutely. That was the one thing I will say. You feel it. I mean, I did anyway. I felt it, especially in the quad, because as I was watching, and it was the first time I had seen the film, so I was trying to take in the overall. I wasn't really going for too much detail because I wanted the larger picture first, and then I wanted to kind of zoom in on a second or a third viewing. So now that I've been watching it over and over again, I'm trying to like focus more on the details of it. But having that first viewing in the quad was very helpful because as I took in the whole, what really stood out was um, your gaze on Rose. Lauren's gaze on Rose was especially in the last scenes. That one scene where you both sing very softly. I mean, it's magical. It really is magical. It's magical because it's French. It's magical because of the emotions that are going back and forth. What's not said, what you feel. I mean, it comes right into you. And that was one of the things because I was speaking with my faculty colleague and he wants to see the film. And I was telling him a little bit about it. And he's Indian. So we were talking about the sense of time and everything. And I said, you'll love this film because it has that's there are sequences where time just stops because the emotions that are flowing between the two people are so real that you kind of get drawn into it. And it's almost like you're in it and time just suspends for a moment and you have an opportunity to just be in the moment. And that's a gift. It's a gift to be able to be in the moment. I'm sorry, Miss Bissett, did you want to say something?
I'm curious to know how many times you've seen the film.
Well, the first time was in the quad when I first met you. And now preparing for this, well, probably about 20 times.
Are are you serious?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Are you
I'm sorry?
joking?
Wow.
No, not at all.
20 times?
Wow.
Because I mean, each time I see something different. So it's like seeing and seeing again. It's like what an artist would call pentimento, when the artist will draw and then you see something, you see through what is on top, what was underneath. And to do that, you have to think about it again and again and again, and sometimes draw it again and again and again. And then you see and see again. And for me in teaching, that's essential so that it doesn't get stale, because anything that's repetitive will get stale unless you have that capacity to view it and see again in it, so that each time there's something different that comes out. And I mean, for me in teaching, I practice doing that quite a bit because it helps me stay fresh.
And can you do that with many films?
No,
No, I would have thought not. No, it could be
no,
unbearable because there's nothing underneath sometimes.
no. No, there are a few films. No, that's candid. No, that's candid. I appreciate the candor. It's true. No, there are certain films like, well, I'll give you an example. I don't know if you would know it. It's an older film, Random Harvest. Okay, that's a romance. That if you're a romantic, you would love Random Harvest. I think it's a film with Ronald Colman and Greer Garson, and it's about a man who has amnesia from the war, and he's by himself. He's alone, and she finds him and she helps him, and they become close. And then he gets in a car accident and he remembers who he was before he had the amnesia, and he forgets all about the life that he had with her when he was an amnesiac. It's a fascinating film, but the beauty of that film is that it's probably one of the most beautifully spoken films on record. The two voices are beautiful in the diction, the articulation. Then the story is beautiful. It's just it's a wonderful story. I could watch that film again and again and have. I must have seen that film probably 30 times. But every time
To
there's
watch
something.
that.
Random Harvest is
Random Harvest. Okay.
it's just
No, let's all let's the three of us get together. Kelly,
no,
Yeah, I
no,
would love to.
it's a beautifully crafted film. It's Mervyn LeRoy. It's a beautifully crafted film, and Garson, the way she relates to him, because he's a man without a past when she meets him, and then he's a man who forgets that he was with her. And what she does is she becomes his executive secretary to be near him. And basically, she can't say who she is. So she just becomes his executive secretary to be near him. She helps him in whatever way she can. It's totally unconditional. And she hopes that he remembers, but I won't say anything more. You'll have to see the rest of the film to get it.
It's really interesting how some films have that power, huh? For me, a film that I've seen, I think probably that amount of times is Good Will Hunting. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, that film, anytime it comes on, I just get completely engrossed in it, and I can't turn it off, and I get lost in it every time, even though I know what happens. And certain films have that power. Can't explain it, I guess.
Yeah. No, and I think it's very different, clearly for each person.
Right.
But I think there are certain films that touch on universal themes. See, for me, Lauren and Rose, there's the references to France quite a bit. But then that's in some ways very particular France. But then there are some universals, and I think I had this question about that. Let me come back to it. Yeah, emotionally, the singing of La Marseillaise has the feel of friendship in Lauren and Rose, whereas in Casablanca, there's a more nationalist tone. Is there an idea that a rallying call to revolution is also a tribute to love and to the light that friendship brings when you experience the heart, mind, and soul of another person? There's the national and then there's the universal. And I think yours gets both. And that's rare in a way. It's usually one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say that was sort of intentional. It wasn't.
What's your experience of France, Russell? Maybe I can get at it that way. I mean, when you experienced France, or when you think of France, what do you think of primarily? Is it the culture, the art, the fantasy, the diversity?
I think it's the sort of culture and the food and the art and the music and just all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I will say, I haven't been to France that often, and I probably have a much more like vivid like experience with like Italy, like in terms of like I've been to Italy like 15 times, and I would like to live in Italy and that kind of stuff. So I guess the France of my imagination is much richer than maybe the reality. I don't know. I haven't been that many times.
Jacqueline, you have though, correct? I mean, you've lived in France or no?
Actually lived in France, but I'm very aware of it as a country. I first went when I was 8. Went to Brittany, and I was instantly just smitten, completely smitten. I went to Brittany, which is a simple place, had a family holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Everything smelled wonderful. I was just enthralled. I kept walking around saying, the table is French, the window is French, the apple is French. I was just so astonished that it could be on a wide scale something other than British, which was very much my life as a British person. Mm-hmm. And it never stopped that. I was always, saying if you were a child, that would be normal for you. But for me, it was just extraordinary. Mm-hmm. That was just another reality. And I started to incorporate France into my life gradually. I didn't speak French. I was useless at French at school, just like everybody else. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really learn French till I was about 28 when I was working on Day for Night. I started to get better at it. But it's a smell. It's a smell. It's a way. It's a joy level which is different to the American joy level, English joy level, completely different. Mm-hmm. And we are different. Every race has different. The brain develops a different way to other races and other countries. Yeah. It's just a fact. Absolutely. So I'm familiar with it, and I really like it.
I mean, Kelly should comment on his relationship with France because he's been there many times, and he's actually married to a French woman.
Okay.
This is true. Yeah, my romance with France started with Henry Miller, who was a hero of mine, and also fellow Brooklynite. And he sort of created the France in my imagination. When I finally went, it surpassed my imagination. So I kept going back, and And yeah, I met a French woman, and yeah, I married her, and I go there quite often. I just adore France and everything
That's
about
lovely.
it. Yeah.
It's nice to have a link. It's nice to have a link that way. It is true though, if you learn a language when you're young, you learn a language when you're a child, it is different from learning it as an adult. Um, it stays with you in a different way. And I think the experience of the country stays with you in a different way. So yeah, it's important in a sense.
You speak many languages?
Um, I'm sorry?
You speak many languages?
In varying degrees, in varying degrees. My mother sent me to a French school, elementary school, where we had a teacher, Madame Tinway, who taught us French. And for some reason, I took to it, and she wrote a letter to my mother, and she said, "You should send your daughter to France because she's gifted." And my mother said, "Fine, you want to go to France?" I said, "Yeah, it would be very nice." And she said, "Fine." And then later, I had the opportunity. The other languages just kind of came. You know, everyone has something where they can just Goodwill Hunting. You can just play, and for me, it was languages. I mean, I could just play.
Which ones do
And
you speak? Do you speak the Latin languages?
French. I never studied Latin, but it is the Romance languages. French, Italian, German. I learned later. Hungarian, elementary.
Wow.
Spanish, I picked up. You pick them up. I mean, if you live in these countries, in a sense, if you don't like living in a country where you can't make yourself understood, you're going to learn the language. So for me, whenever I was in a country where I was living, I wanted to learn the language because I wanted to be understood. And I just immersed myself. I refused to speak English. And that's the downfall. If you're in a country and you're constantly speaking English, you never learn another language. So I just immersed myself with the people of the country and I began to imitate them. And that's how I learned. Or listening to songs. I remember in Italy, Russ, you'd appreciate this. I had an Italian language teacher. And she said she learned in English by listening to Beatles songs. And then she started singing them, you know. I mean, it was amusing because that's how she learned English. So yeah, I mean, I think
You have to have a
that's
good ear, though. Some people just don't have an ear for stuff.
no, I guess they don't, or they maybe are afraid of it. I think some people they're afraid to try to speak other languages because they think maybe that they won't sound right.
Yeah, well, that's
I just enjoyed it.
yeah,
I would get into it and have fun with it. So yeah, yeah. All right, let's continue. Oh, all right, this one. When you ask how do I look in leave of absence, the answer is one word: loved. And this really struck me. I like that film, Leave of Absence. There's a certain cadence to it. And what I was wondering is in Lauren and Rose, the generosity. This is where the generosity comes in. How do you experience that as an actor? I mean, is it something where it's a give and take, or what is it that makes for generosity in filming between actors?
it's a kind of trust, really. You give from your heart, and you don't worry that you think the person who you're giving it to is giving it, receiving it in the right spirit. De bonne foi, qu'il est de bonne foi. How do you say
Oui.
that? To be
So it's a type of good faith.
it's a kind of what?
Good faith.
Yes, if that person is in good
La
faith.
bonne foi is faith. It's a good
Yeah,
faith.
in a sense, it's about good faith. You trust the human.
Mm-hmm.
They're not trying
Okay.
to do or just steal the scene or just muck around, you know. And they're not thinking about stuff that's not relevant to what you're doing. They're listening. It's just it's really. I think if people are not in good faith, you feel it. It feels
Mm-hmm.
phony. And I mean, people when you work with an actor, and they're especially particularly in crying sequences, you know, you can tell. Do they where they have to have a lot of emotion? I mean, how good are they at faking it, or do they get to the point where they actually becomes real? I remember in that film, the one you mentioned, the actor
Leave of absence.
Brian
Mm-hmm.
Dennehy kept saying to me, I don't know how you get there. I don't know how you get there. He said, I'm not able to get there in the scenes of emotion. He said, he put his hands over his face and he acting, putting it on, going through the motions. And I remember I hadn't really been aware of that before. And he said, you're really there. And I don't know how to not be there. Otherwise I completely cannot do the scene. I have to get there. I get there.
Right.
Wherever I get there, more interesting or less interestingly. But generosity, I suppose, would be when somebody's not there, trying to help them to get there, and certainly not cutting off the circuit that they're in trying to reach. I mean, however they need to do it, because obviously it's a technique sometimes too. It's not just the truth always. People have to get to, after 5 takes, generally people are pretty cleaned out. There's not much left to, so they rely on technique to some degree.
Right. Kelly, is that true for you as well, or?
Yeah, I think to me, it's the same as it is in life. With someone who's an intimate friend, I feel like why they're your friend is because there's a reciprocity. There's they're being vulnerable and open, and the more that you're vulnerable, the more that they're vulnerable, and there's that's how intimacy to me is created. And so with acting, I think it's the same thing. If the actor is there and open and vulnerable and listening, and they're not only seeing 2 inches in front of their own face and so self-conscious and closed off, I think that's when it becomes selfish. And so to me, the opposite of that is generosity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's one thing you can see, I haven't been on as many sets as these two, but like, when you're working with actors, and sometimes when an actor is not on camera, but they're giving as much of a performance or as much of themselves, even though the camera isn't on them, like you're on a, if I'm shooting Jacqueline and Kelly is still fully there and still working, that's like, you can really feel the generosity in those moments too. Because sometimes people just sort of tune out when
they do. Sometimes they're just not there for you. You feel like saying, come on, guys, give me what you were giving me when we were on your on your face, on your side. Let's get the same performance going.
Is that where the discipline to be mentally and physically fit, is that where that comes in? In other words, to be focused to that degree? Because I would imagine that is tiring, to be 100% there over the course of a 15-hour day. I mean, that has to be exhausting, mentally and physically.
It can be, but it can also be, if the person is feeding you too, you mutually feed each other, and it can be very exuberant giving.
I see.
Can be.
Okay. So then you're actually getting an energy from it.
It can be. When it's
I feel like, sorry, I feel like in this case, when you're dealing with really wonderful writing and a wonderful actor such as Jacqueline, it does feed you energy throughout. It's not exhausting. It is energy giving because the elements there are just so wonderful. But there are times when you're on a film and it can be, even an hour can feel exhausting because the elements aren't there.
Yeah. So either you're energized or you're drained. And if you're energized, then that just keeps feeding. It feeds into it.
Well, I don't think it's quite as neat and tidy as that. I think you can go in and out of it. But I used to give way too much energy to the crew when I started. My need to be liked was quite dominant, I think, and I didn't know what I was doing. I just wanted to give everybody the best day possible, and I wanted to be there for each crew member. So I would be, when they'd get to me in the evenings, they say, "Oh, time for your close-up." I mean, like, bloody hell, what's left? Is there anything else? Can we do the close-up soon? Can we? And it's like a torture thing, trying to keep your energy. And I've learned now. Maximilian Schell told me, he said, "Got to go to your trailer. Don't hang on." I said, "No, but they give me energy. I love being." She said, "Go to your trailer and do the necessary to retain your energy for your work." I've gradually learned to do that.
Did he actually teach you that on St. Ives or in another?
He talked to me about that. He directed me in a film called John Voight, what was it called?
The End of the Game?
End of the Game. Yeah. He
Yeah.
was a difficult man, but he had lots. He was very clever. I worked with him
Mhm.
for 3 films, I think. I did 3.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I liked him in Judgment at Nuremberg. That
he was a
that for
good
me
actor.
was
He's a good actor.
yeah,
But that was a
absolutely.
bit of information. But nowadays, I'm not quite sure how I feel about that because I was reading about contemporary filmmaking. People say the actors are really appreciated if they stay on the set and if they don't go back to their trailers, so they have complete access to you at any time. But I think
Hmm.
the trailer's not usually parked very far, ideally. So now I'm wondering, I also like to stay on the set because I like that atmosphere sometimes. So now I'm not sure now whether one should go away or stay on the set in contemporary filmmaking in terms of what's expected. People whine at actors who have to go always back to their set because they've got to come and get them. They need the 5 minute makeup check, da di da, because they're lying down in their trailer or something. I'm not quite
Hmm.
sure what the etiquette is now, but I
Well,
was
I mean, I have no idea what the etiquette is, but I do know that probably the actress who was one of the most loved, at least in the American sense, was someone who did what you did earlier in your career, and that's Miss Barbara Stanwyck.
really
She was known for loving to be with crews and talking with them and chatting up with them and doing everything with them. And if you ever watch her on film, she always seems to have quite a lot of energy, especially in something like Ball of Fire, or Meet John Doe. And yet she was always talking with film crews. I think that she was loved for that.
I
So I
love
don't know. I
Barbara
don't
Stanwyck
know what.
so
I'm
much.
sorry.
Barbara Stanwyck's like my favorite. I love Barbara
Well,
Stanwyck.
she's a Capra. She's Cap, and that's his. Capra used her, I think, the most. And if you like Capra, you like Stanwyck. I think they were a kind of duo.
Yeah.
But she was noted, Miss Bissett, for actually, I think, being very, very chatty on sets and asking people questions about their family, their dogs, their cats, everything. So I don't know what
I was
the
like
etiquette
that
is.
too. I was like that too. But but there's a point that comes up sometimes. They now the crew know that you are pretty open to talk to them and they're enjoying it also. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have a scene coming up, which is a really
Mm-hmm.
bad scene.
Mm-hmm.
You're walking towards your set and somebody stops and wants to continue on the level that you've been with them beforehand. And you know that you cannot do it because you've got to concentrate on your scene. You have that moment of awkwardness of having to say, like saying, sorry, I can't be friends right this moment. I've got to concentrate on this first. And there's a slight conflict in my mind there. And
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to be rude and you want to be ongoing, you have to make this thing which is outside the realm of what you're there for.
Right.
Kind of conflicting little energy that I occasionally
Mm-hmm.
worry about.
Mm. Indeed. All right. I'm conscious of the time, so a last, well, maybe two last questions. Um, the mirror of light. Okay. Moreau's quote about the mirror of the world. Does that in any way conjure up for you anything that you remember or learned from the mirror of light? Do the two things connect for you? That quote in the film from Moreau
Remember
and the Colin book
The Mirror of Light.
about the loss of the ego.
Also, yes, it was an unbelievable book for me. I think it's affected me enormously. I think, and I had an extraordinary experience after reading that book. I mean, I had some kind of spiritual experience. I don't know. I was changed. I was different. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't speaking in tongues, but I was almost speaking in tongues. I can't explain it. And I saw a light, and I saw like a transcendental kind of column of light, and then I gave the book, unfortunately, to a friend and never saw it again.
Mm-hmm.
That phrase, I hadn't made the connection from the Jean Moreau line to. Did it have anything to
So
do
it's
with?
a powerful line in the film, and I had heard an interview where you spoke about the mirror of light, and I read the book. I didn't have your experience of it, although I appreciated it more philosophically, I think, than anything else.
It hit me at a certain moment. It absolutely hit me. And the book was emanating. I found it in the Shakespeare Company in Paris.
Right in Paris, yeah.
It
Yeah.
was a book that was very, very ravaged and had been
Mm-hmm.
written everywhere. It obviously it was so imbued with energy, this book. I later found a copy of it, a completely empty copy of it with nothing written in it, and it had a completely different effect on me. I mean, I've seen in films people talk a book lighting it up literally. It was emanating that book. It wasn't. It was not a normal book. The energy coming out.
I'm curious. I am curious. I have to ask this question. Okay, the book was emanating, but did you have the impression at any time when you had the book in your possession that somehow it connected you to a previous time? So not to the present, but to a previous time.
No, I don't think so. No, it was a new experience. It was wisdom. It was a wisdom.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that can happen. All right. Last question. Do the characters in High Season and September, do they speak more closely to you as a person than other characters you've portrayed?
I don't know. I like both of the roles. I enjoyed High Season because I wanted to do more comedy, and I'm very fond of James Fox and Irene Papas, people I adored. I working with them, and I felt special and happy. Though the director had me absolutely terrified because she wanted me to be naked.
Was Claire Peplow?
Yeah, she wanted me to be naked, and I just didn't feel I could be naked. I couldn't. I shipped a running machine, not a rowing machine, a rowing machine and a bicycle to Greece, where it was incredibly hot. I worked out on those machines like a fiend. Wasn't like a fiend, and the heat was staggering. And then I had to run and meet Kenneth with the scene when I go on the beach and Kenneth Branagh. I managed to get myself the clothes off, and I managed to do it, run, and I didn't realize there were people in front of me in the bushes. I thank God I didn't know they were there, because I would.
People in the bushes?
There were people in the bushes up on the cliff, and a whole crowd of people were up there. Anyway, that's not the point. I did the scene. I in the water. I did the scene with Kenneth Branagh, and the scene of me, my backside, was not in the film. And I had a very mixed feeling. I said, I worked so goddamn hard. How dare she not? So I obviously don't look good. I mean, it's the only moment I've ever been completely unclothed in a film, and they didn't use it. So I didn't know what story.
What I remember of that film was you were in the water with Kenneth Branagh.
But before I got into the water, I was walking down the beach. I was without my clothes running down the beach.
Oh.
I had thought I had reached the absolute zenith of confidence. I was like, I'd worked so hard at it. And then when they cut it out, I said, I didn't know. It was a very mixed feeling. I said, life is very, very curious and ambiguous. I was proud to do it. At a point, I thought my bum was in the right place. And then it wasn't there. So I said, well, I guess my bum didn't make it.
Lauren and Rose were originally supposed to be naked in the restaurant, and then it was actually Kelly who said no.
Lauren and Rose were supposed to be naked in the restaurant.
He's quite bad. Our director is quite bad.
And the idea behind that was because I thought this was supposed to be more of a relationship that evolved kind of almost to a not mother-son, but a mentorship type of relationship.
Yes.
So the idea of having them nude, is that the idea of vulnerability, of intimacy of a certain kind?
Joking. He's joking.
Oh, he's joking.
Joking.
Okay, very cute, Russ. All right. On that happy note, we are at 4 p.m. I want to thank you all. Really, it's been a pleasure. And I'm sorry.
You're a marvelous interview. You really did your work. You really did your work, didn't you? Do amazing.
Oh, it's great. It was so fun.
Great.
No, it's fun. You said it would be fun, Russ, and it is. I mean, I enjoy these types of things. I enjoy facilitating things, and yeah, I do. I like it a lot. It's a learning experience, and you take it with you, and then you learn more. So I enjoyed it. No, but thank you all. Please, when you get a chance, Russ, send it to me, and then I'll ask the person I work with about editing, but you tell me how you would like it edited. We can do it in short clips. We can do it however you like.
Whatever is good for you guys. It's really for you.
Let me speak with Sidhu. Let me speak with he heads the UN initiative. We want to try to do this in such a way that we can show the film, and then maybe we can have some clips of this with your insights and mix it up a bit. The other thing I wanted to ask you is if you would allow me to innovate. We have a very good partner in Berlin. And what I'd like to try to do, in addition to having the viewing here in New York, is I'd like to try to have a transcontinental viewing, if that's something you would be open to. Meaning we would have Berlin and New York online at the same time, the way we're online now. We would be viewing the film, and then we would have a discussion all in one kind of session. Right. And it would be completely transatlantic. Since it's the UN, it's important to try to. I sent you a piece. I didn't mean to, but being that you have it, the UN Chronicle piece that dates back 20 some odd years, that was the original idea behind creating these internet types of programs. You bring people together across continents and you share ideas. And it's a much more diverse type of experience. To bring an international student to New York is different from having that student speak from where he or she is from. And the internet allows us to reach out that way. And showing a film in that context would be fantastic. So if you're open to it, then I'll go ahead. Good, then I'll do it. Good. Okay, then I'll do it. Absolutely. All right, great. We'll be in touch. Kelly, it was a genuine pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
So nice to meet you as well. Thank you. Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
No, and I really love that background. You're giving me ideas about how to shape my library. That's terrific.
Thanks. Thanks.
Have a great rest of the day. All the best.
Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.